At HAI Stories, we bring you incredible real-life stories that prove kindness, courage, and integrity can still make a difference in the world. In today's story, a simple act of generosity, a waitress buying a meal for a struggling veteran, leads to an unbelievable turn of events that stuns an entire town. What happens when compassion goes unnoticed by most, but is recognized by the right people? How does one small act of kindness change multiple lives forever? Stay with us until the end, because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. If you believe in the power of doing what's right, even when no one is watching, then hit that like button, subscribe to HAI Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. It all started with a $5 meal, a simple act of kindness that changed everything. On a quiet evening at Maggie's Diner, a small roadside restaurant, waitress Emily Carter was wiping down the counter, waiting for her shift to end. The night had been slow, meaning fewer customers and even fewer tips, something she couldn't afford with rent due next week. Just as she was about to start cleaning up, the bell above the door jingled. A thin, weary-looking man stepped inside. His clothes were worn, his boots scuffed, and his eyes held the weight of exhaustion. He walked up to the counter, carefully pulling out a few crumpled bills. "Excuse me, miss," he said politely. "What can I get for $5? Emily glanced at the menu. The cheapest meal was at least $8, and she knew his money wouldn't get him much. But something about his quiet dignity made her decision easy. "You're in luck," she said with a warm smile. "Tonight, we have a special, one full meal for $5. The man hesitated, surprised. "Really?" Emily nodded and placed the order before he could refuse. A few minutes later, she set a hot plate of food in front of him. But before he could take a bite, a sharp voice cut through the diner. "Emily, what do you think you're doing?" Her boss, Rick Henderson, stormed over, furious. When Emily explained she paid for the meal herself, he scoffed. "We're not a charity." Then, to everyone's shock, he grabbed the plate and threw it in the trash. That night, Emily lost her job for doing the right thing. But what she didn't know was that everything was about to change, in the most unexpected way. An unexpected turn of events. Emily walked home that night with a heavy heart, her mind racing. She had lost her job not because she had done something wrong, but because she had done something right. The unfairness of it burned inside her, but there was nothing she could do. Rent was due in a week, and now, with no income, she had no idea how she was going to survive. The next morning, she woke up early and set out to look for a new job. She spent hours walking around town, filling out applications at local businesses. But at every stop, the answer was the same. "Sorry, we're not hiring right now." By midday, exhaustion set in, and she found herself standing across the street from Maggie's Diner. She had no reason to go back, but something made her stop and stare at the place where everything had gone wrong. And that's when she heard it, a deep rumbling sound in the distance. She turned toward the noise, eyes widening as a convoy of military vehicles rolled into town. Jeeps, armored trucks, and dozens of uniformed soldiers moved in perfect formation, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The vehicles slowed and stopped, right in front of Maggie's Diner. Inside, Rick was going about his day, feeling no regret about firing Emily. To him, employees were replaceable, and he had no patience for people who questioned his authority. But when the diner door swung open, he turned, and his smirk quickly faded. Standing in the doorway was a tall man in full military dress uniform, ribbons and medals neatly displayed on his chest. His presence alone was enough to command attention. Behind him, a group of soldiers followed in silence, their combat boots striking the floor in perfect rhythm. Rick swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. The officer's sharp gaze swept across the diner before locking onto him. "We're looking for Emily Carter." At that moment, the room fell into stunned silence. A shocking revelation. The entire diner went dead silent as the uniformed officer's words echoed through the room. "We're looking for Emily Carter." Rick's confidence wavered for the first time. He cleared his throat. She doesn't work here anymore." The officer nodded, as if he already knew. "We're aware." Before Rick could ask anything else, the door swung open again, and in walked the same man from the night before, the one Emily had tried to help. Only now, he wasn't wearing tattered clothes or worn-out boots. Instead, he was dressed in a full Marine Corps uniform, his ribbons and medals shining under the fluorescent lights. He stood taller, his presence commanding. He was no longer just another homeless man looking for a meal. Rick's jaw tightened. You, the man, now unmistakably a soldier, ignored him and turned to the officer beside him. Colonel James Carter, he said, introducing the man in charge. And these men, they're my brothers. Colonel Carter stepped forward, his gaze still locked on Rick. This man, he gestured to the Marine, is Sergeant Daniel Brooks. And last night, he was humiliated in your establishment. Instead of being treated with dignity, a waitress who showed him kindness was fired. Rick swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. I didn't know who he was. Daniel's expression remained calm, but his voice was firm. You didn't care. The tension in the room thickened, and for the first time, Rick seemed genuinely rattled. Outside, Emily still stood across the street, watching the scene unfold. When she heard her name called, she froze. Colonel Carter turned toward the window and locked eyes with her. Emily Carter, he called out. Every head turned in her direction. She could have run, could have disappeared into the crowd. But something in the colonel's voice, steady, commanding, but not unkind, made her feet move forward. With her heart pounding, she stepped inside. Rick's face paled when he saw her. This is ridiculous, he scoffed, trying to laugh it off. She's just a waitress. Colonel Carter's gaze turned cold. And yet, she did more for one of our men in a single night than you have in your entire life. The few customers left in the diner began to murmur among themselves, some shaking their heads at Rick in quiet disapproval. Emily, still unsure of what was happening, looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod, a silent thank you. Then, Colonel Carter reached into his pocket and handed her a card. Miss Carter, we heard what happened last night. More importantly, we heard about what you did. We need people like you. People who stand up for what's right, even when there's no reward. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? The colonel smiled slightly. We run a program that helps veterans transition back into civilian life. We need compassionate people to assist in counseling, job placement, and community support. Rick scoffed. You can't be serious. She's not qualified for that. Colonel Carter barely spared him a glance. On the contrary, Mr. Henderson, she's more qualified than you'll ever understand. Emily looked down at the business card in her hand, heart pounding. Less than 24 hours ago, she had lost everything. Now, she was being offered an opportunity she never could have imagined. Rick let out a dry, humorless laugh, shaking his head. You really think this changes anything? You think they'll remember you in a week? Emily didn't hesitate this time. She smiled. No, she said softly. They won't forget. And with that, she turned her back on Maggie's diner, stepping toward a future she never saw coming. A new beginning. The next morning, Emily stood outside a large brick building just outside of town, the address printed on the card Colonel Carter had given her. She took a deep breath, still unsure if this was real. Yesterday, she was a waitress with no job, no future. Today, the U.S. Marine Corps was offering her an opportunity she never imagined. Stepping inside, she found the lobby bustling with activity. Veterans sat in waiting areas, some chatting, others deep in thought. Volunteers moved around, handing out paperwork, guiding people to different rooms. The energy was completely different from anything she had experienced before. It felt purposeful. A receptionist greeted her with a smile. You must be Emily Carter. Emily nodded hesitantly. Yes, I think I have a meeting with Colonel Carter. Right this way. She was led down a hallway to a large office where Colonel Carter was waiting. He stood as she entered, offering a firm handshake. Glad you decided to come. Emily returned the handshake, though her grip was nowhere near as steady as his. I figured I owed it to myself to at least hear you out. Carter gestured for her to sit. Good, because I think this is exactly where you need to be. As she settled in, her eyes wandered around the office. Framed photographs lined the walls, smiling Marines, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes. Commendations, medals, and awards were proudly displayed. But what stood out most was a simple handwritten sign on the desk. No one left behind. Carter followed her gaze and nodded. That's our mission here. We take care of our own, not just the ones still in uniform, but all of them, even the ones the world seems to have forgotten. Emily thought of Daniel Brooks, the man she had helped, and how he had walked into that diner with nothing but a few crumpled bills and the weight of his past on his shoulders. What exactly would I be doing? She asked. Carter leaned forward. Our program helps veterans transition back into civilian life. Some need jobs, some need housing, and some just need to know they still matter. We need people like you to help make sure no one falls through the cracks. Emily hesitated. I don't have experience in this kind of work. Carter smiled. You have the most important kind of experience. You care? And sometimes, that's all it takes. At that moment, Emily realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't just working for a paycheck. She had a chance to do something meaningful. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Carter grinned. Welcome to the team. Finding purpose in a new path. Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into her new job at the Veteran Transition Center. She quickly learned the ins and outs of the program, how to assist with job placements, coordinate housing support, and connect veterans with mental health resources. It was exhausting work and, at times, overwhelming. Many of the veterans who walked through the doors were struggling. Some had been out of the military for years, but never fully adjusted to civilian life. Others were fresh out of service, unsure of how to start over. But Emily listened. She cared. One afternoon, while setting up for a job fair, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw Daniel Brooks, the very man she had helped that night at the diner. But he was different now. He stood taller, more confident, wearing a neatly pressed polo shirt with the organization's logo on the chest. His hair was trimmed, and his posture no longer carried the weight of hopelessness. Hey, he said with a small smile. Hey yourself, Emily replied, surprised but happy to see him. How's it going? Daniel glanced around the bustling room. Veterans moving from table to table, meeting potential employers and support organizations. He exhaled deeply before speaking. It's strange, he admitted. For years, I thought my life was over, that no one cared. And then you came along. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. I just did what anyone should do. Daniel shook his head. Maybe, but you were the only one who did it. She didn't know how to respond to that, so instead, she simply squeezed his hand. Later that evening, as she locked up the center, she stepped outside and looked at the horizon. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, the last rays of sunlight stretching across the town. A few months ago, she thought this town was just another stop in her life, a place she had to endure. Now it felt like something more. She pulled her phone from her pocket and scrolled to Colonel Carter's contact. After a moment, she typed a simple message. Thank you for believing in me. A reply came almost instantly. We don't leave good people behind. Emily smiled, slipping her phone back into her pocket. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she truly belonged. A full circle moment. 6 months had passed since Emily started working at the Veteran Transition Center, and each day had been a whirlwind of challenges and rewards. The work was demanding, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a real difference. The center had grown. More veterans were walking through the doors, seeking help, finding jobs, reconnecting with a community that understood them. Emily had become a key part of that effort, mentoring, organizing events, and ensuring no one was left behind. The night before their first major community event, Daniel walked into her office. Tomorrow's a big day, he said with a grin. Emily nodded. The center was hosting an open house, bringing together employers, support groups, and veterans looking for a fresh start. It was her project, something she had poured her heart into. She studied Daniel for a moment. His transformation from a struggling veteran to a leader within the program was remarkable. I'm proud of you, she said. He smiled. You helped me get here. Emily shook her head. No, Daniel. You got here yourself. You just needed someone to remind you of what you were capable of. As he walked out, Emily realized something. This place hadn't just changed Daniel's life. It had changed hers too. And for the first time in years, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. A day to remember. The next morning, Emily arrived at the Veteran Transition Center earlier than usual. The place had been completely transformed. Banners hung from the walls. Booths were set up with job recruiters and support organizations, and volunteers were making last-minute preparations. By noon, the first veterans began arriving. Some were confident, ready to take the next step, while others hesitated at the entrance, unsure if they belonged. Emily moved through the crowd, greeting people, answering questions, and making sure everyone felt welcome. She watched as Daniel Brooks laughed with a group of younger veterans, sharing stories and giving them advice. Nearby, Colonel Carter was deep in conversation with a government official, likely working on securing more funding for the center. Then, near the entrance, Emily noticed a familiar sight, a man standing alone, hands stuffed in his worn-out jacket pockets, uncertainty in his eyes. She knew that look. Stepping forward, she gave him a warm smile. "First time here." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I wasn't sure if this place was for me." Emily nodded. "I get that. But let me tell you something. Everyone in there has felt the same way at some point. And every single one of them is glad they walked through that door." After a pause, the man exhaled deeply and took a step inside. Emily smiled, knowing that today, one more life was about to change. A ripple effect of kindness. As the event continued, Emily watched with quiet satisfaction as the center filled with veterans, employers, and community members, all working toward a common goal. The air buzzed with conversations, job interviews taking place, veterans signing up for housing assistance, and support groups forming connections that could change lives. She saw Daniel leading a discussion with a group of newly arrived veterans, his once we. Nearby, Colonel Carter was shaking hands with business leaders, securing new partnerships that would help expand the center's impact. The organizat. As she moved through the crowd, she spotted the man she had welcomed earlier, the one who had hesitated at the entrance. Now a spark of hope in his eyes. Emily knew that feeling. She had been there before. Unsure, doubtful, wondering if the next step was worth taking. And just like Daniel, just like so many others who had come through these doors, he was about to realize that he wasn't alone. As the event wrapped up, Emily stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the center. Daniel joined her, standing beside her in comfortable silence. "Hey." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Something I've held onto for a long time." She unfolded the small, worn-out napkin. Her breath caught. It was the receipt from the meal she had bought him that night at the diner. "Why do you still have this?" she asked Hervey. Daniel met her gaze. "That night, I thought I was invisible. And then you came along and proved me wrong." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she smiled. She had never expected one simple act of kindness to create such a ripple effect. And now, she knew, this was just the beginning. The power of one small act. As Emily held the worn receipt in her hands, a record of a simple meal, it was turning point. One moment of kindness can change a life in ways we may never expect. Daniel let out a small chuckle. "I thought about throwing it away more times than I can count," he admitted. "But every time I looked at it, I remembered that night. That was the moment I realized someone still saw me as a person." Emily swallowed hard, blinking back tears.
Asterisk. I never thought that one meal would lead to all of this. Daniel nodded. Asterisk. Neither did I. A comfortable silence settled between a place of second chances, of hope, of new beginnings. Just then, the doors to the center swung open. Ammon, she had encouraged earlier, walked out with a determined look on his face. He caught her eye, hesitated for a second, then gave her a small nod before heading down the street. Emily felt a swell of emotion. She knew that look. It was the look of someone who had just taken their first step toward something better. She exhaled deeply, looking up at the sky. The same sky that had once seemed so vast and empty now felt full of possibilities. Daniel broke the silence. "You built something real here, Emily." She shook her head with a smile. "No, Daniel, we built something real." Daniel smirked and held out a fist for a bump. "Still, I think you deserve to keep that receipt now." Emily smiled as she folded the small, tattered piece of paper, and a simple act of kindness had changed everything. And paying it forward, one person at a time. The power of kindness, a lesson for life. Life often presents us with moments where we must choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy. Emily's smallest act of kindness. Many of us have encountered situations where we saw someone struggling, a neighbor going through a tough time, a stranger who needed help, or a friend who felt forgotten, and spark a chain reaction of hope and transformation. For seniors, this lesson is especially meaningful. Many have spent decades helping others, checking in on a friend, sharing a story with a younger generation, or volunteering in the community. We see Emily's journey also teaches us about second chances. No one person to believe in someone else to turn. So today, ask yourself, how can you make a difference? Maybe, if you believe in the power of kindness, highlight button and comment, kindness matters. bell subscribe to HAI Stories, and join us in Makino act of goodness is ever wasted.